Call the Midvale City Special Council meeting on this June 22nd, 2021 to order. We welcome all of you. We are broadcasting electronically and in person. And if you want to view it online, you go to www.midvallecity.org/YouTube. I think that. I want to welcome everyone. We're going to begin with a pledge of allegiance. So if you'd all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Rory, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Robinson. Here. Glover.
Here.
Gettle.
Here.
And Sperry.
Here.
Thank you. All present. Doesn't say anything here about notes. I want to thank this council and staff, Mayor Pro Tem, everybody did an outstanding job. I got to tune into a couple of them. I know it was difficult for Bryant to, I think it's first time you led this meeting, but you wouldn't know it from the camera's perspective.
That's good. It's interesting when you're so worried about procedure. I almost wasn't paying attention to the content because you're so worried about. So I appreciate what you do, you know, when we're trying to discuss it and you keep us moving. So it was fun.
You did well. Everybody did well. I appreciate Paul, Quinn, and maybe Bryant. Did you attend any meetings for me? Okay, the two on the end.
I attended the refugee resource opening.
Yeah, and Paul got all the fire and police.
Yeah, there was about 5 different meetings, I think.
There was a busy time, budget time as it is in the city.
Yep, they were passing all the year-end budgets or budgets for next year. So.
Fortunately, everything had pretty well been worked out. It was more procedure, but you never know.
We did thank, while we were there, we thanked the fire and the police for what they're doing. So I think that they're on the going the right direction, and they really are looking out for our interests. So we say thank you.
Yeah. It's been a while getting it in order, especially in UPD. When I started as mayor, there was some teeter-tottering and we got it straightened out. It took a while, but we're there. I think we're there, and appreciate the conscientious use of the taxpayers' funds and the protection we get as a result from fire department and police department and our staff. Well done. Okay, we only have one action item tonight. It's a consideration of ordinance 2021-0-16, expanding firework restrictions in Midvale due to existing drought conditions. And our city manager, who's carried this city on his arms now for, let's see, this is month 6, so 3 months now.
Yeah, it feels just like no time at all. Easy peasy. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this special city council meeting this evening to discuss the issue of the firework restrictions. In your packet, we have included the ordinance that has a proposal that we'll discuss further as far as the meeting goes. One thing I think, and I'll go through in my presentation a little bit on this, is that this has been something where there's been a lot of changing opinions amongst the different entities at the state, county, and local levels about what can and can't be done. So we'll discuss that in more detail. I do just want to start off, though, by saying that this does seem to be an item where there is a lot of passion amongst the residents, and from what we've been seeing both on social media as well as from direct communications. I would say that it is overwhelmingly that we have seen interest from the public in there being a total ban of fireworks within Midvale. That doesn't mean that we haven't heard from some people who think that fireworks are an essential part of celebrating our holidays in July. But the number of people that have communicated that to us has been significantly less than those that have had the view that there should be a further restriction. Are you driving? Is that what's happening there? Okay, perfect. Thank you. What my intent is that I will quickly try to go through, describe the existing conditions, which is the basis of law on how we can make a determination for an expansion. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the complications that are going on with the politics related to the ordinance at this point in time. I will describe what's in the law very briefly, show you what is we are proposing and what some of the considerations you need to think about as we get into the discussion portion of this item. With that, as we're all aware, we are in a very bad drought. It's important to note that when you have dry air, high temperatures, that is constantly wicking water, moisture out of plant material. And as we're all aware, that makes it for a highly combustible situation. Currently 100% of the state is in drought, 90% is extreme drought, and 60% of the state is in exceptional drought, which is a big part of the reason why we're having this discussion this evening. As we look towards some of the information we receive about the regions of the country where wildfire potential is particularly bad, you can see that both in June and July, the predictions are that it will remain bad in the state of Utah. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion in news articles and on social media from a variety of folks in state and county and local government about their views on fireworks and the potential to ban those fireworks. As we see, the Utah Division of Forestry indicated that this could be the most expensive fire season on record. As we look at what the cost has been, Mayor Jenny Wilson had indicated that there's already been a cost of $12 to $22 million associated with fires in Utah, and that in 2020, Utah set a record for human-caused blazes, more than 60 fire caused by fireworks. Now, one of the things that's sort of particularly challenging, and in the packet I talk about this, is that the legislature in 2018 created some specific legislation that gives authority to local governments in order to make decisions with regards to fireworks. At that time, the intent was to try to restrict the city's abilities to sort of make broad sweeping bans on fireworks. And so one of the things that has been particularly sort of concerning or confusing as we go through and look at this is that we have heard from state officials some mixed messages on what we can and can't do. We've heard the governor indicate that while that this is one of the worst droughts that we've ever seen, and in a recent press conference indicated that he encourages local municipalities to act on restrictions, but he also acknowledged that the fireworks legislation is messy. And so that leads to some of the discussion we're going to have a little bit later about where some of the gray area is potentially in the law. Another sort of mixed message that we've seen recently is the Senate Majority Leader indicating that Utah legislators will not seek a total ban on personal fireworks. We much prefer to keep firework restrictions on a local level to allow individual municipalities and counties to make those decisions. There already is a ban on state and federal lands. There's a lot of small, and then this is where sort of on the flip side of that, they also say that they want individuals to make, think twice and be careful. So it's sort of saying, do these restrictions but it also makes it sound like they aren't as interested in doing that. So we also have Speaker Brad Wilson saying that dry conditions have increased fire damage or danger across many parts of our state. We've taken steps to empower local officials rather than imposing statewide firework bans. I do not believe it is necessary for the legislature to hold special session at this time. Instead, my hope is that local leaders will determine what works best in their communities and that Utahns will act reasonably and responsibly. So again, sort of these indications that there is an interest, at least from the legislature, that we should be taking responsibility and doing what we can to protect our communities, even though the legislation is, as Governor Cox said, messy. I'm not going to read all the way through the code, but the general gist of the code that is impacting our decisions on fireworks is that there needs to be, in order for there to be a restriction, there needs to be indication that there is an existing condition that is particularly hazardous. There's an indication that needs to come from fire officials as well as from the legislative body, city council in this particular case. There is a listing of the particular things that they consider to be hazardous areas, which are supposed to be the area around which these restrictions occur. Those being mountainous, brush covered, forest covered, and dry grass areas, or within 200 feet of waterways, trails, canyons, washes, ravines, and similar areas. Beyond that, then they go into this sort of discussion about how you don't have to make it so that it's only around the hazard, but that you can find a reasonable, logical sort of marker, a road, a river, or something like that, that can be your boundary so that it's easy to communicate to the public where that boundary is around those hazards. And then once you make your designation of where you want the firework ban to be, we have to be able to produce maps and communicate to the public in a clear fashion where those restrictions occur. This is the current map of UFA's map on where fire restrictions exist around the valley. This is on a daily basis shrinking the amount of areas where fireworks will be allowed. But this is, as of today, what the map looks like.
Was that before Salt Lake City's announcement?
That was before Salt Lake City's announcement. This map was as of this morning from UFA. As we look at our own map for Midvale City, right now, the only areas that are technically considered to be one of these hazard areas where fireworks are prohibited is directly along the river bottoms of the Jordan River, and then the entirety of the Bingham Junction Project area, because it is, for the most part, a big open brush covered field. Now, before I get into what we're proposing for where we think restrictions should go, I wanted to just bring up a couple things for consideration for us to talk about. The first is that the way that the law is set up, we're designating geography is sort of how we determine where fireworks are going to be prohibited. This isn't necessarily a situation where we're going to be going through and saying that we can do those little ash snakes, but we can't do sparklers and we can do mortars or any of that kind of stuff. It's sort of the way we're set up right now is, where do you want fireworks to be banned? And when we say banned, we mean all fireworks. Another thing to take into consideration as we look at sort of how we should behave is sort of what are the actions taken by other communities. Not that they should direct us in what we're going to do, but that they sort of indicate the sort of gray area that is created by the legislation, because each community is doing something different. As we move towards the east, as we saw on the map from Midvale, we see communities like Holiday and Cottonwood Heights basically doing an entire ban in their city of fireworks. At the same time, we have seen, and it was in an article today, that Murray feels very differently, and they come down on the side of saying that there is a very restricted interpretation of what the legislation says, and they're not going to do an entire city ban or broad areas of their city. They're only going to be focusing around these sort of hazard areas. So, and then as mentioned before, Salt Lake City has banned fireworks throughout their community. And as we move sort of to the west and south, those communities have sort of a more restricted sort of view on it, at least at this point, as opposed to like broad citywide restrictions. Another thing that we've been thinking about as we've been talking about what our restrictions would be was what the communication strategy would be on this. Now, as we look at what is proposed and in the packet, there will of course be a social media presence. We will be putting things in the journal, on our website, on our electronic boards about the fireworks if you approve what we propose today. We also are planning on doing some of those digital road signs that would be into the major entrance areas into the areas west of 700 West. Now, there has been some discussion amongst council members about the potential or ability for us to expand the restricted area to cover the entirety of the city. We would use most of those methods that we were talking about before, but the difference would be, it wouldn't make sense to rent 50 of those large road signs. So we would be looking at purchasing sort of the political signs that would say fireworks banned in Midvale and placing those throughout the city during the timeframe that we're concerned about fireworks. That's how we would communicate what this is. It's definitely a little bit harder to get out to everyone so that they know if we were to say, do something like prohibit fireworks throughout the city. Enforcement. I've been talking with Randy about the chief about enforcement. It's a hard thing to enforce on fireworks because who's lighting off the fireworks, who's watching from their steps, how do you catch those folks? But at the same time, we are proposing in the ordinance that we would make this an infraction if someone does launch fireworks within the restricted area. And an infraction is sort of the equivalent of a speeding ticket, right? Lisa, is that?
Yes.
Something around those lines. Anyways, it's a tough thing to enforce. Chief Thomas is here though, in case anyone has any questions about enforcement and what kind of activities would occur with that. Additionally, there's the question of if not here, where? Now, I don't just mean this, this can mean where do the folks who want to launch fireworks in Midvale go if they want to launch fireworks? It could be fine to say nowhere. It's a bad year. But the other way of looking at it too is that I have some concerns that if the communities around us are banning fireworks in their communities and we have areas where it is allowed, does that increase the likelihood that there will be people coming from other communities to launch fireworks in our community? And I am concerned about that. The other thing, just for your consideration as we get into the discussion side, is there are some communities that have talked about the idea of having sort of like sanctioned launch areas for fireworks, so that if you're doing a broad ban, that there is still some potential for places for them to do that. That is open for your discussion. I don't know that that seems like the best idea, but I just wanted to bring that up as something for you to consider. And then finally, while this is not directly about the restrictions, I did want to bring up again and make sure that we have a discussion on whether or not under the current conditions, whether they get worse or stay the same, if what the interest is of the council to proceed with the city sponsored fireworks shows associated with harvest days. At the last meeting, there was a little bit of some difference of opinions. Since then, I've talked to some council members who have had seemingly stronger opinions about this. And so I just wanted to see if we could discuss it one more time and get a sort of a clear response on how we want to proceed. So those are some items from consideration. In the packet that I provided, as well as with the ordinance, the map that we are originally proposing is identified here. Essentially, what we would be doing is saying that we would expand from its current location along the river bottoms and Jordan Bluffs to 700 West. We feel that this is an easily defensible fireworks prohibition expansion because of some of the hazardous areas that are on the west side of the city, as well as the fact that 700 West becomes that easily identifiable marker for a boundary on the restricted area. I've also included in here some of our parks, or I shouldn't say some, our parks, which isn't necessarily tied in with the state code, but it's just something that we have the ability to do regardless of what the code says. And we wanted to include that in the ordinance if you so chose. With that, the only other thing I guess I was, we'll open it up to discussion on this topic. We could, well, We also have an option and a potential replacement ordinance for the one that's in the packet that could describe a way of addressing a fireworks ban across the whole city. As I mentioned before, the original proposal is something that we think is clearly defensible under the existing law, although we believe that this approach of banning it throughout the city is something that there is enough gray area in the code that we believe that there is a way of describing that. We have provided a substitute ordinance, if you so chose, that we could use to enact this proposal, if that is what you would like to do. Now, as I mentioned before, we also have Chief Thomas and Chief Larson with us this evening to talk about the perspective from UFA and from UPD with regards to any of these proposals. This time I would encourage you to discuss the topic before we proceed.
Comments for city manager?
I have some questions, I guess, would probably be better answered by Chief Larson. Just regarding so we can get a clearer understanding of, not just the fire hazard that exists in Utah generally and in our bench areas generally, but, specifically to Midvale City. If you could just let us and the council and, anyone who is going to pay attention to this meeting know, the specific dangers that exist, if there are any now, currently, and in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Gettle. That's a really good question. I came to Midvale in 2006. I think a little history is important because the law talks about historical, of course, and then current or existing conditions. Those are kind of two separate issues. Most of the fire calls that we received on the 4th and 24th were down towards the river bottoms. We did have some on the east side and some of the open old kind of farm lot areas and things of that nature. So there wasn't at that time, during some of those years, a lot of concern for a lot of areas of Midvale. The concern, of course, was personal safety, I think, more than anything. However, in my opinion, this is an extreme year. We're entering record numbers as far as moisture content and other factors throughout the valley. I'm going to be getting a report tomorrow from the Forest Service showing the energy release component. And I'm sorry, I don't have this up on the screen, but I'll just explain it. They take samples of different vegetation, different areas, they send them to a lab and they measure the energy release component, or the BTUs, British thermal units, the amount of heat it can put off. And just this was, I think, around the 1st of June, right here, it's gone past what they consider maximum. If it's that in the mountains right now, down here in the valley where it's been hotter, where we've had more wind, we're already putting irrigation, not restrictions, but requests in for people to water less. In my opinion, throughout the entire UFA area, hazardous environmental conditions do exist currently, and they're extreme, more so than any other year. I was asked the question, we sent a letter out last Tuesday after our board meeting. We had some other cities that were very concerned. And we talked about 13th East as a barrier, and we talked about 9th East as a barrier coming straight across from where Salt Lake City had. And the question was asked to me, not by just one individual, but several. Well, what's the difference between 7th East and 9th East in some of these older communities where they're well established with a lot of trees, a lot of brush? What's the difference? What's the difference between 3rd East? And you could say the same here in Midvale. I think given the conditions, whatever this body decides to do can be supported and backed up. I think there are enough cities with enough concern this year and enough citizens with enough concern that I think what you decide to do can be defensible. Lisa would be more of a better opinion on that legally, I think, than I could, but I've spoken with our attorney for UFA. We're going to be meeting with Chief Peterson and the assistant chiefs tomorrow to discuss this because it's going to come up in other cities. So given that, I would just simply say that this year, extreme hazardous environmental conditions, quoting the law, do exist, and they are extreme this year, more than any I've ever experienced in my career. So I am worried about this season. I'm worried that the forecast doesn't look any better. It looks hotter. I was talking to our emergency manager yesterday, and he said the forecast even for humidity is low. That's critical too, because last year the temperature dropped and the humidity went up. And that really prevents a fire from starting. That's really critical. I don't know that we're going to get that this year. So areas where it may not have been as much a concern in years past, I think could be this year. That's maybe the long version of my opinion, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
I appreciate your opinion. One thing that I struggle with this map is, in Utah, we allow people to shoot aerials off. They go hundreds of feet in the air. So, we have a rightful concern to worry about something like just the Midvale Park or all the brush over here where the Zion's building's going in. So someone on 699 West shoots the firework, 400 feet in the air on these extremely windy days. I mean, there's days where, even today feels, very windy, could blow deep into these areas. So for me to make this work, I would say, okay, here's the areas we identified. Then we'd need like a mile radius around them all, right? Because that would protect you from the areas we're worried about getting stuff blown into them. And our city is like 7 square miles or something, right? So at the end of the day, it would mostly be the whole city, right? And that seems defensible if we think if these areas are high risk, we want to protect them from the aerial, fallout. Where I'm from back east, aerials are not allowed by common citizens.
Right.
It blew my mind when I moved here. I thought I was in a war zone when, every neighbor was shooting them in the air. We could light fountains in some areas, and that was sort of it. So a little different than what I'm used to. So that's my thought is if these areas are for sure a worry, then we should extend the zone to where a aerial could land in it. And I think what we get at the end is mostly a red map.
Yeah, that's some really good observations and comments. Chief Peterson and I were involved in some of the negotiations when the law changed 3 years ago. And we brought that up, the aerials and the wind, them being carried to other areas, because originally the 200-foot buffer zone was not in there. And we wanted more, but that's what we were able to get. The aerials that are legal are only designed to go up 150 feet. And so that gave us maybe a 15-foot buffer or 50-foot buffer from a, 200 feet fallout zone. Sometimes I don't think that's enough given wind conditions, but that's what we were able to get.
And Evanston sells like 400-foot aerials that
Well,
some people may purchase.
You still have the element of some of the mortars that come from out of state that aren't legal. And I don't know what we can do to prevent that or police that. That's really hard. When we originally came up with this version that you're looking at, we were looking strictly at the law about a clear line of demarcation. In other words, we had that hard line along the Jordan River, but it went through some neighborhoods and backyards, and it was really hard for a lot of your citizens to look at and say, okay, am I restricted or not? It goes right in front of my house, does that mean I'm not restricted? Can I shoot off in the street? What can I do? So that portion of the law that says to go to a clear line of demarcation, such as a major roadway, that was kind of the thinking and the reasoning behind going straight down 700 West, because it would give that clear line of demarcation and it would give a better buffer to the Jordan River area. That's kind of what we were looking at in our thought process on that. And again, I'll just say that there is a very heightened concern among citizens and among fire officials this year. What I'm worried about is some of the small fires taking our resources and something happening somewhere, and it's going to take us a little bit longer maybe to get there because of our depleted resources, and it can get some headway on us. Chief Peterson expressed that concern, and I expressed that as well. So for this version, I'll go back. That was kind of our reasoning to go to a major roadway.
My issue with this map is I get that those are the high risk areas, but like Councilmember Brown just brought up with those aerials, we're looking at yards that haven't been watered and all sorts of, I mean, we have all seen everybody cleaning out their houses and stacking things up. They're COVID cleaning. It just seems like the recipe for us to start losing communities to fires. Not, I mean, we watched, was it last year or the year before, how many states around us were battling major fires that were destroying entire communities. The risk for me doesn't outweigh the benefit of having a firework.
It's a really good comment. I think of Oregon last year. Many areas in this valley are similar to a lot of those places there. And you're right, it did wipe out entire communities.
It was a pretty significant fire last year, I believe, Saratoga Springs, right? I remember
Yes.
driving home from somewhere and the mountain was on fire. So, it's been here too, a few years ago, there was a significant part of Utah that was burning as well, so.
Right.
On this map, we've got neighboring communities. We're surrounded. In the conversation, I understand Cottonwood Heights has sealed off their city. We don't touch Holiday. Murray's, we don't know for sure what they're
Right.
going to do. How about Sandy?
They're considering it tonight.
Okay, West Jordan?
Tomorrow
Okay.
for West Jordan.
So
already a significant part. Just also to your question, I mean, whatever they do tonight, there's already a significant portion of Sandy that is already.
I can see that, yeah. It looks like everything west of I-15 on this map.
Can I zoom in here on this?
Kind of.
Can you zoom in for me on Sandy?
Is-
I can just describe it. The line right now from Cottonwood Heights is going straight down 13th, clear across Sandy and touching up with Draper on 13th. That's what they've been talking about, whether they decide, is it tonight you said the meeting? To extend that to the entire city, I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't heard. The only ones I'd heard of yesterday were Salt Lake City and South Salt Lake.
Okay.
But I haven't heard anything from South Salt Lake today.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I was just wondering, sorry.
Go ahead.
Last meeting, you had said that you felt comfortable that having the fireworks for the Mid-Bell Harvest Days Festival, you felt confident that we could keep that well protected. If this continues, like it looks like it's going to, do you still feel that it would be wise to have?
If conditions worsen, we're really going to have to take a close look at that. I don't know what things are going to look like that first week in August. I'm praying for rain, sometimes I wish we were getting what they had back east, maybe not quite that extensive, but I don't know. We'll just have to kind of watch and be careful with that. I know one year we had some really big winds. I think it was, what, 4 years ago, maybe 5? That we had some huge winds. It was carrying debris 2 blocks past the park on the north side. And we caught the tree by the senior center on fire. And I think we had another brush fire real close there. So we ended up canceling that maybe a third of the way through the show. So we'll just have to watch the dry conditions. Even public shoots make me nervous and our staff, because if a wind pops up, you don't know where it can carry the debris and the sparks. So we watch that very closely. And if it looks like it's carrying it too far, then we'll stop it till the winds die down or stop the show. But given the dry conditions, we may have to evaluate what that looks like maybe a week or 2 weeks before.
I think for us, we need to make a decision soon in order to, not lose the entire amount of money. So if maybe to ask you a question this way, if the conditions that are here today are present in August, do you still think it would be safe to have the fireworks show as we've had in the past?
I'll always err on the side of safety and say no.
Do you think that there's another location in Midvale that would be a safer location for that type of fireworks show? Because I know the park has some issues. Number one, it's an open field of grass and there's trees and buildings.
I don't know. We could look at that.
Because if there was a place that, you would be more comfortable and say this is safer than the park, maybe we could have that discussion as well, because
Sure.
no one wants to cancel the fireworks on harvest days, but
No, and we can,
that's,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's why, we have tough decisions to make all the time. And this is a pretty tough one.
Well, there was the proposal about, potential drone, and then I think we can look into that. I mean, it may be cost prohibitive for us, but we can look and see if that's a reasonable alternative.
And Laura might know this. If we pay and conditions do get exponentially worse, or there's a lot of wind, are they, can our contract allow us to wait 3 weeks to do it? Like, or is it like that day only, no refunds? Sorry, city, you're out of a ton of money unless you try to burn your city down.
Oh, sorry.
So historically, we do not have a contract with Vortex. We don't have to pay a deposit.
Like, so we just have a handshake kind of agreement. Are they a Utah company?
Yes, they are.
So they understand our conditions?
They do.
Can we talk to them about that? If we feel it's bad, I don't know about everyone else, but last year we just did a fireworks show without anything else, and everyone still seemed to like it. So if we have to push it past harvest days, I can't say that we can't do fireworks this year at some point. Everyone is being very reasonable on what they're requesting, so long as there's a public option, which is an interesting situation. But if it is super windy and hot, it might be a bad idea to do it when we normally do it. But if we did it, early September, because maybe some rains come in during back to school or something. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't want to say no to it.
I think conditions are gonna dictate what we
yeah.
do.
But are you? I guess you're okay if it's not that time, 3 or 4 weeks. Conditions improve. I don't know.
I will say that right now, Holiday and Magna are going on ahead with their public shoots on the 3rd and 4th.
Do we need to make a decision on harvest days tonight? Okay.
No.
But soon, because we don't have another meeting until July 6th or so.
That's right. I guess if the answer is we're still thinking about it, that's fine. Part of it is that if the group was ready to make a decision tonight, then we could start communicating on it. But if we're not quite there yet, we're going to wait to see what the conditions are. We can do that. So What do you guys think? Wait, I mean, we don't need a real nods. Wait, we'll see what happens.
For harvest days?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we wait.
and we can do some
I think we
research
see how
on the,
conditions are. Let's see about the drone option and then we can make a decision. Yeah, Laura, if you can let us know, I mean, kind of timing wise, when the drop dead date is that we need to decide that.
What I would recommend communications wise is that we still state that unless conditions change or unless the fire marshal feels it's unsafe, we're going to proceed with fireworks show. As far as our marketing for harvest days, I would like to say that we're going to proceed, but with the stipulation that if the fire marshal feels it's unsafe, that it may be canceled, just to let people know it could be canceled.
We put 100% blame on the fire marshal. I can totally on board with that, actually. I'm good with that.
Thank you.
And hopefully you'd let the vendor know that that's what we're doing so that they can prepare if it happens to get canceled.
I will call him tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
so we'll take that direction. The other sort of discussion then would be sort of, there is the proposal that we had in the packet, which I've not heard from everyone on, but it sounds like this maybe isn't the preferred option. Now, there are other things that we could do, but in anticipation that that might be the case, we did prepare, as I indicated, sort of a replacement ordinance that would expand the area under which or over which the fireworks would be prohibited to the boundaries of Midvale. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts on that proposal?
The biggest question I have about this is probably geared best towards Lisa. And that would be, you, Matt, mentioned that you thought that it was marginally defensible at best, I think, or maybe at worst.
I think this morning it was not defensible. In the afternoon, it was marginally. And then in about the hour or so before this meeting, it became much more defensible.
Okay, because that's key for me. Personally, well, there's so many, I love fireworks. I grew up in a rural town where that was our big thing, once a year, fireworks. That's most of the city budget went to fireworks. However, also thinking about these conditions, obviously things change due to conditions every single year. But, we've, as a council in the past, have, talked about passing ordinances, too broadly that A, don't get enforced because either we can't enforce them or B, that it's just too difficult to enforce. So, the biggest complaint I've seen online through commenting is, if we pass an ordinance banning fireworks, we need to have that sort of mechanism in place to actually enforce it. If everyone still shoots off fireworks and we don't enforce it, then, we've lost all credibility as a body, as a governing body, I would say. So yeah, I guess I'd have that question for Lisa, and then also to Chief Thomas as to, his team's approach on the 4th and the 24th when those days inevitably come upon us.
As the city manager said, it's tough to enforce. Every year we do, even with our dispatch, we do get the calls that come in. I anticipate if there is a citywide ban that the good neighbor that doesn't shoot theirs off will call in to report the bad neighbor that's out there shooting theirs off. So I could see our call volume even increasing over a normal year. We're prepared to flex our resources to, if I have to put out some overtime shifts to at least go make contact with people. Like everything else, we're not out there to be the bad guys, but at the same time, we're definitely in a critical situation. As Chief Larson was talking, it just brought back to memory one significant fire in this valley, not in our community, but anywhere in this valley can pull resources from all over this valley just to deal with it, as we saw last Wednesday in Mill Creek. So if Sandy or us or anyone else has a significant fire, typically your law enforcement will get there really quick. Try not to get in the way, try to clear the way for the bigger rigs to get in there. Typically we're there first, but it does one good event sucks up a lot of resources, police and fire, and we work well in concert. But at the same time, the city goes, and it's typically on these celebrations, we have a lot of other things that happen from the police side of the house as well as the fire. So we'll support obviously whatever the council and city determines to be the correct course of action, but we can anticipate it is difficult to enforce. We really don't want to have to. We love to tell people if we do roll up and catch them that, please stop, we'll be good about it. But the second time out, or if it's a significant fire, we're not willing to, we don't have time to really PR this. We're probably just going to move on to the other 10 calls that are holding. So that's just kind of what I anticipate.
And to me, that's not that weird. I mean, if you had a cop on center, you could probably pull someone over every 10 minutes for driving 3 miles over the speed limit, right? Like,
yeah,
you can only catch people that you can catch people. So,
yeah, if we make contact on one, there will be 10 more. I mean, even with the ban, I would anticipate the fireworks are going to go off just like, after hours fireworks every year. And trust me, I'm one of them. Those that want to sleep or go to work the next day are hearing the fireworks going off after hours. So we will certainly deal with it as we need to. Thank you.
I've got a question, maybe Chief Larson could help. We have a county park within our boundaries. Does our city ordinance cover the county park or what?
I think that's a legal question, probably yes.
didn't the county already ban all county property? I thought
Yeah, they have all unincorporated.
just unincorporated.
Mhm.
But I bet there's signs there that you can't light fireworks there anyways, right? It's the same with schools. Like you can't go to the elementary school, light a fireworks. So that map is not totally.
And even though they own the park, I mean, it is in Midvale City. It's not in Salt Lake County, Utah. It's in
Right.
Midvale.
Yeah, I understand it. I'm just wondering, would our ordinance cover county parks? We have on our map city parks that were highlighted.
Yeah.
Should we not have highlighted the county park also, maybe the school district fields and included those as out of bounds?
Well, I don't know, Lisa. I would think if they're within the city boundaries and your control that you would.
In this scenario, yes. In the other ones, we can only control where we identified and our property. So that was the reason for us stating the ban on city-owned property was because it's our property, we can do that. If it's not in a restricted area, then we couldn't, even though it would make sense, we couldn't say county is included in that. 'Cause we
Right.
don't have any control over that.
Right.
It's my understanding that it was unincorporated areas and city, or I'm sorry, and
County-owned.
county facilities. So their ban would sort of already include the park.
Yeah.
And if we were to do this expansive version of this, I believe that it would be okay to include that on this map.
Yeah.
One other quick point, if I could, when Chief Thomas was talking, we're going to have a larger presence out also. And we planned this before we saw other cities starting to exercise more restricted areas just because of the season that we were being faced with. We're going to have quite a few personnel from prevention and emergency management out just as a presence. I found that sometimes can act as a deterrent. They know we're out. They know we're serious about enforcement. Our special enforcement investigators are going to be out. We're going to have some extra type 6 engines out. So we're going to have a larger presence also to try and help as much as we can.
I think one thing, we might not think of when we discuss this is, fireworks can cause fire. but also within a drought, we're asking people to conserve water. So if there was a large fire in Midvale, especially, you know, at one of our larger apartment communities, or even, you know, a neighborhood with single family homes relatively close together. I'm thinking of the avenues behind us. Can you explain like what that sort of devastation, you know, as far as our water supply would cause in
Yeah.
addition to?
That's a really
Fire.
good question. I can tell you that 1 2.5-inch hose line, if we were to fight a commercial structure fire such as the one they did in Mill Creek, 1 2.5-inch hose line can put out as much as 325 to 250 gallons a minute. And I can't imagine how many hose lines were out on that. If we had a 10,000 square foot structure, we could have 4 or 5 of those hose lines easy stretched out. So that's 4 or 5 times 325, 250 gallons a minute for the duration till we get it out. So that's quite a bit of water.
I'm pretty sure the Chelsea Apartments, the first fire that they had, you know, it was either on the 4th or the 24th. And, you know, the preliminary, at least what I remember, was that it was most likely a firework that caused that.
Yeah, it was suspected that a bottle rocket into a bush, but that couldn't be proven. So,
But given the day that it was, you know, probably
yeah.
safe to assume that.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of water is expended to fight them.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
So I looked up Salt Lake County. Generally, you know, under normal circumstances, fireworks and explosives are prohibited in county parks without a special event permit obtained from the mayor. I don't think the mayor probably is going to approve any of those permits this time around.
One other just oddity in the potential full city prohibition ordinance that I provided is that there's an oddity there where we talk about some boundaries that are located outside of our city. This is falls into still trying to comply with the law where it says that we need to provide easily identifiable landmarks or whatever in order to describe it. We say all of Midvale within these boundaries would be the area that the prohibition exists in. I just know that it could look a little strange. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear why we were going about that way. That way.
Sorry. Excuse me. One other thing real quick. So I know, you know, it would be an infraction, and that would probably be for someone who did it multiple times on the 4th and the 24th and keep getting called out to that person. What should the public know as far as their personal liability for setting off fireworks, especially if a city has determined that these emergency conditions exist to the point where we're going to ban them within the city limits, and something they do does cause a damaging fire to their own structure or another structure?
Lisa, will you cover that?
The personal liability is as big as it, you know, there isn't really a ceiling on that in terms of if somebody does something, the criminal part is not tied to that and could go much greater. And even if it's prohibited as an infraction, if they do damage negligently, that they're going to have a ton of liability.
I just wanted it to be known that, you know, if you set off fireworks and you're like, well, it's only an infraction and, you know, big deal. Well, you know, the conditions are such this year that, you know, if that worst case scenario does happen and you set your neighbor's house on fire, you're not just going to be slapped with an infraction from UPD. There's a lot more that you should probably consider.
I've noticed that the questions seem to be slowing down. And so it would be great to sort of move towards the preference side of things. Like I said, clearly the previous one didn't seem to be a preference, but I haven't really heard anyone say that this is a preference. Is there an in-between version?
I prefer this map.
Okay.
So I'll make it easy. I'll start. I prefer a full ban. I think it makes the most sense this year. Sorry, chief, for giving you a little more work, but I think you'll have a lot more work if a significant fire situation happens. Like I said, everyone I've talked to, they're sad about it, but I have personally not talked to a single person that told me, no, absolutely not. I've had some begrudgingly said, well, if the city still does their show, I can sacrifice this year. So I'm full on in support of this map.
I agree with Councilmember Brown on that. I would go with the full ban on the map.
The good thing about my district is no matter what map we go with, my area is in the red. So the only thing I will say to Councilmember Brown's point is I have had one conversation with someone who was absolutely against a ban of fireworks. Not that, you should bring up the only person who mentioned such a thing, but, I'm sure if one exists, there are,
Yeah, I agree.
probably hundreds who exist and maybe are just quieter about it. So there is the personal liberty is, the words that were used, it's my right to set off a firework. I'm American. It's American and Utah holidays. So we're going to get that. And I think we all up here know that, there might be some folks who feel strongly and will make their opinions known. But I do feel that, that's a very minority opinion, and it's because most people generally are pretty reasonable. And when the perfect conditions exist, for a very large scale fire, which we've already seen, like the one in Mill Creek. We have projects like the one in Mill Creek going on right now in the city. So, it would be negligent on our part not to address it at some level. All of that said, I have come around to the full city ban. I do, just have some personal reservations about, taking that joy from some people, who definitely look forward to setting off fireworks on holidays. I used to be one of them. But yeah, I'm okay with this expanded map as well.
And I'm up for re-election this year. I understand it can make it be political or whatnot, but I feel like I'm working what's in the best interest of a city. I was elected to do hard things, and if people are upset about it, I still feel like I'm doing what most people want. I do think there is probably a larger than one person that will be upset about it, but I'm willing to take that, to do what I think is best for our community.
I've received comments from two people, one by email and one face-to-face, and both were in favor of a total ban. So that's the extent of my contact.
Matt, I didn't see the ordinance with the full ban. Is there an expiration date for
October 15th.
15th? Okay. And I would like to make that clear to when we do our, however the vote shakes out, just to make it known that, I think some people do fear that we're using anything as an excuse to ban fireworks forever. And just would like to make it clear to folks that we're not doing that.
And I don't have an interest to do that, to ban it forever either. So.
No, 2 years ago, our water was great. We were seeing like whatever stream runs Cottonwood Heights kind of border was overflowing. So, yeah.
Any other comments?
I just, I don't like to ban anything. But if it's for the better health of the whole community, I have a problem banning stuff just because businesses are ruined by, they're planned on it and they're ruined a lot, for a lot. So, but I do understand the need to overlook some of this for the betterment of the whole community. But I don't want to make it a practice that we ban stuff just to be banning and ruining businesses. That just is not, it's not a thing that I want to do. But I do understand the need to make sure that we're safe. And I'll defer to the fire marshal. I think that they're the ones that have the expertise to whether we can do stuff successfully and not be hurt because of it. So.
I haven't seen a fire marshal or chief in the state yet who has
They're all-
argued,
they're all-
argued on the
I mean,
other.
I went to all of the fire meetings here over the last 2.5 weeks or so, 2 weeks, and they're all really concerned. They're not only concerned with our lands, they're going through heck and high water right now, but also just in our cities, they're concerned that things are drying out.
I forget which meeting it was, but one of the fire marshals was asked on a scale of 1 to 10, and he said 11 was his current concern. So.
And we all know what happens when you turn your speaker to 11.
And things could change. I mean, I'm hoping, you don't know, they might not, might get worse. But again, we could have a good storms come in and change everything in a week or two. We just don't know. That's why I say to look clear that far out for harvest days. I mean, if we ban them now, everybody's going to really want to have some fireworks. And if we can do that, then I think we ought to. If it gets worse and we can't do it, then yeah, then we have to back down. But
Well, I do think one part of our messaging has to be, if we ban citywide personal fireworks, as Holiday did, make it known that in lieu of that, we're going to have a plan to anyway, have a larger professional fireworks show for everyone to enjoy later in the year. That should be a key element of our communication outreach.
Agreed.
I have similar feelings. I don't like to ban and, have government overreach and impose on people's lives, but there are certain situations that you need to for the good of the public. And we just went through a year of that, of certain restrictions. So we've learned from it, and we hope it's temporary and we come next year and whatever ban we do citywide or less restrictive on that we're back to normal next year. So.
Before we proceed, at least I just had one procedural question to make sure. We had a packet that had the one ordinance, and because they have the same number, when the motion is made, is there a specific language that needs to be added to that so it's clear it's the substitute ordinance?
I would include read the area of the ban in passing that.
Okay.
Explain that more. Yeah.
Further questions, comments? I guess we're ready for a motion.
I move that we approve ordinance number 2021-016, expanding fireworks restrictions in Midvale City due to exhibiting drought conditions.
Existing.
It says exhibiting.
Citywide, do you want to say, right?
Okay, I'll do it again. I move that we approve ordinance number 2021-016, expanding fireworks restrictions in Midvale City, citywide, due to existing drought conditions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now is the time for any questions or comments.
Yeah, you've read the ordinance, and that's citywide. Is that the one you're
Yeah.
saying?
He said citywide.
Okay.
Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all right.
Councilmember Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson. Aye. Brown
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
That ordinance passes unanimously, and we're grateful to move to the next item on the
Is that Glover's motion?
Motion to adjourn.
agenda.
You guys did see we added the RDA item though?
Take my fireworks.
The NBA. Let's ban fireworks.
I have
Oh, yeah.
I have a really good friend.
Yeah. That's what he was saying.